Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
It's good to be back. And today we are stepping into some truly deep waters.
We really are. Today, we're looking at a text that, it's often filed away as a classic of African-American literature, or maybe a semi-autobiographical novel.
No,
It is, of course, both of those things, brilliantly so. But our mission today is to read it a little differently. We want to read it as a blueprint.
A blueprint of a specific kind of machine, a social machine.
Exactly. We're doing a deep dive into James Baldwin's incredible debut novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain. And I want to be really clear with everyone listening, right from the jump, this is not your typical book club review.
Right.
We're not here to talk about how beautiful the sentences are, even though, my God, they are stunning. We're not going to rate the prose or, debate the symbolism in that traditional literary way.
No, we're using this novel as a diagnostic model. We're pulling it apart to look at the mechanics inside. And we're asking a very specific systemic question.
And that question is, how do inherited belief systems, these structures we're born into, how do they transmit trauma, authority, and moral judgment from one generation to the next?
It's a huge question, and it's one that goes so far beyond this one book.
It really does. And I think we need to define our terms right away because the language here is important. When we say belief systems in this context, we're talking very specifically about the Temple of the Fire Baptized, which is a storefront church in Harlem, 1935.
A very specific time and place.
But the mechanisms that Baldwin lays out, the gears of this machine, they feel incredibly, almost uncomfortably relevant to anyone who's ever been part of a high control group or a really rigid family structure.
Or honestly, any society that tells you you have to perform a certain kind of goodness just to stay safe.
Yes, that's the core of it.
And that's the key. The setting is specific, this Pentecostal church in the middle of the Great Depression. But the architecture is universal. It's about social control. It's about the brutal hierarchy of the family. And ultimately, it's about the incredibly high price of what the system calls safety.
So our scope today, what we're really focusing on are the structures and patterns inside the text. We're going to look at the church and the family, not as backdrops for a story, but as governance systems.
They're governments. Governments of the soul and of the household. They have rules, they have enforcement, they have consequences.
So to understand that, we kind of have to start with the architect of this world, James Baldwin himself. Now, like we said, this isn't a biography.
No, but you can't separate the artist from the work here, not with this book. The raw material for this model came directly from his own life.
Right, because this is a semi-autobiographical novel. The protagonist, this young boy John Grimes, is, for all intents and purposes, a young James Baldwin. The struggles John feels, the terror, the confusion. Baldwin lived that.
He did. Baldwin was known as a preacher's son, though like John in the book, his father was actually his stepfather. And this man, David Baldwin, is the direct model for the novel's antagonist, the terrifying patriarch, Gabriel Grimes.
And when you read the background material, especially the introduction to the novel by Andrew O'Hagan, there's this description of Baldwin's father that just, it gets under your skin. It's so visceral.
I know the one you mean.
He's described as handsome, proud, and ingrown.
Ingrown. It's such a perfect, chilling word.
It is. I've been thinking about that word all week. What does that even mean for a person to be ingrown?
Well, think about what an ingrown hair or nail does. It's supposed to grow out, but instead it turns back in on itself. It gets infected, it festers, it causes pain because it has no proper outlet.
Wow.
That's David Baldwin. That's Gabriel Grimes. Baldwin wrote that his father was, quote, locked up in his terrors, hating and fearing every living soul, including his children. An ingrown soul.
And that festering terror is the engine of this entire system we're going to analyze. Baldwin himself went through what he called a prolonged religious crisis when he was 14.
The exact age of John on his birthday in the novel.
Exactly. He joined the church, he became a boy preacher. But he said something later in his life that is just key to this whole deep dive. He realized that for him, back then, God and safety were synonymous.
Let's just pause on that equation for a second. God equals safety.
On the surface, it sounds good. Reassuring, maybe. We all want safety. We associate it with comfort, with protection.
But just flip the equation. If God is safety, then what is everything outside of God?
Danger.
Total, absolute, existential danger. It means you can never, ever leave the system. It means the world outside the four walls of that church isn't just the secular world. It's a hellscape waiting to destroy you.
And that is the fundamental trap. He went into the church to escape the dangers of the street. And we have to remember the context here. This is Harlem in 1935. He's trying to escape the visceral racism of the white world downtown, the police who would beat a young black boy just for existing. But he's also trying to escape the harlot's house next door, the razor fights on the avenue, the violence within his own community. He was looking for a bunker.
But the bunker he found was just a different kind of cage. A much more intricate one, maybe. A cage made of moral absolutes and divine judgment.
Which brings us to the structure of the novel itself.
Yeah.
If you haven't read it, you might think it's this sprawling story that covers decades, but it's the opposite. It is incredibly compressed.
It's so tight. The word is claustrophobic. You feel like you can't breathe sometimes when you're reading it.
You really do.
Baldwin designed it as a pressure cooker. Almost all of the present-day action takes place over a single night.
The Terry service.
The Terry service. A long prayer vigil. It's John Grimes's 14th birthday. And the entire structure is built to maximize this pressure. By cramming it all into one night of spiritual crisis, Baldwin can show us the accumulated weight of decades, of generations of history, slavery, the Great Migration, secret family sins, all of it crashing down on this one boy's head in real time.
It's like a physics experiment. You seal a subject in a room, you turn up the heat, you crank up the pressure, and you watch to see if they break or if they transform into something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the central thesis we're going to be unpacking, if you had to distill this whole deep dive into one sentence, is that faith in this narrative functions as a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
On one edge, it is absolutely a refuge. It's a sanctuary from a racist, violent, hostile world. It keeps you off the street. It gives you community.
But the other edge.
The other edge is that it's a restraint. It's a system that actively represses identity, that demonizes sexuality, and that, most importantly, buries the truth under layers of piety.
So the system's promise is safety, but the price of admission is your authentic self.
That's the transaction. And on a bigger scale, the book shows how this huge, unresolved historical violence, the trauma of slavery and Jim Crow, that these families fled from the South. It doesn't just disappear when they get to New York. It's not healed.
It just changes form.
It transforms, it turns inward and becomes intimate family violence, all under the holy guise of saving the children from sin.
That is a massive concept, and I think to really get it, we need to break it down into its component parts. We've organized our analysis into 6 core systemic insights. Let's start with the first one, which you've labeled religious authority as inherited governance.
Right. And when I say governance, I mean it literally. The Temple of the Fire Baptized is not just a place people go on Sunday to sing and feel good. It is a government.
It has a constitution, a legal code.
Absolutely. It has a legal code, the Bible, as interpreted by the elders. It has judges, the pastor and the deacons, and it has enforcers, the entire community watching each other. Father James and the elders, they hold absolute, unquestionable authority. They interpret the law, they enforce the law, and they punish anyone who breaks it.
And like any strict government, it has a very, very clear border policy. You are either in or you are out.
That's the in-group, out-group dynamic, and it's the primary mechanism of control. The system functions by constantly reinforcing the separation between the saints inside the church and the sinners out on the street.
The sinners are anyone not in compliance. The people listening to the blues, the people at the bar, the people just living lives the church deems disorderly.
And this border isn't just about where you are physically. It's about how you behave, how you appear, even what you think. And there's this one scene in the book that illustrates this perfectly. It's the public shaming of Elisha and Ella May.
Oh, the scene is so uncomfortable to read. It's brutal.
It's brutal, but it's a perfect diagnostic of the system's legal code.
So to set the scene for listeners, Elisha is the pastor's nephew. He's this charismatic young preacher, a talented musician. He's a star in the church.
He's the golden boy.
He is. And Ella May is the granddaughter of a very powerful elder. They're both young, they're attractive, they're deep inside the in-group. They are the poster children for the future of this church.
They're the future of the institution, exactly.
And one day, the pastor, Father James, calls them out. Publicly, in front of everyone. Now, if this happened today, you'd assume they did something major, right? Got caught stealing from the collection plate. Maybe they were having sex in the back room. Something scandalous.
You would think, but what was their actual crime? What was the charge leveled against them?
Their crime was walking disorderly.
Walking disorderly. Let's just unpack that phrase. Had they slept together? No. The text gives no indication of that. Had they even kissed? Unlikely. Their sin was that they had been seen walking home together, laughing. Maybe they touched hands.
It's all about the optics, the appearance of impropriety.
It's the appearance of independence that is the actual threat. That's the real crime. Father James gets up in that pulpit, and it's basically a show trial, and he publicly humiliates them. He talks about the unripe fig plucked too early.
Which is such a gross, deeply sexualized metaphor to use for two teenagers who were just walking down the street. It projects this whole narrative of sin onto an innocent moment.
It projects the sin, and then it punishes them for the projection. But look at the mechanism of control there. It demands total 100% compliance. The message is, if you are part of this in-group, your body is not your own, your time is not your own, your reputation is community property.
It's control through public humiliation.
It's a public execution of their social standing. And by doing that, Father James reinforces the border for everyone else. He is sending a signal to every other young person, every member of that congregation. This is the line. And this is what happens when you step even one single inch over it.
So it's not even really about Elisha and Elame's supposed sin. It's about reasserting the absolute authority of the system.
It is entirely about authority. It is governance through fear, disguised as spiritual correction.
And it establishes that the authority is always watching. The state, in this case, the church, is omniscient. It feels like a panopticon, where you never know if you're being observed, so you police your own behavior at all times.
That's the goal. Internalize control. Which leads to the obvious question, why would anyone stay? Why does John, who is so full of doubt and terror, want to join this system? Why doesn't Elisha just walk out and say, forget this?
And that brings us right to our second insight, piety as protection and coercion. Because the alternative that's presented isn't just, being a non-believer or finding a less strict church.
No, the alternative is death.
Not just spiritual death in the afterlife, physical destruction right here, right now.
The gutter, that's the term they use, the gutter. And Baldwin is a master of atmosphere. He paints this vivid, terrifying picture of what John sees when he looks out his window at the avenue. It's not just the world, it's a war zone.
Yeah, he sees the harlot's house downstairs. He hears rats in the walls. He sees drunks passed out on the street.
And he hears about the razor fights. The razor is this constant looming symbol of the world outside the church. It cuts, it scars, it kills.
And it's not an abstract threat. John sees it happen to his own brother, Roy. Roy's the rebel. He's the one who refuses to submit. He goes out, he hangs with the sinners, and what happens?
He comes home with a bloody bandage on his head because he got cut in a street fight.
And the system uses that. This is the really insidious part. For Gabriel, for the church, Roy's injury is not a tragedy. It's not a consequence of poverty or just bad luck. It is proof.
It's a data point that proves the system's hypothesis is correct.
It validates the entire coercive structure.
Exactly. Gabriel, the father, looks at his bleeding son, and his response is essentially, see, I told you so. The world is evil. If you leave the safety of my rules, you get cut. If you stay inside the church, you are safe.
So John's motivation to be saved, to join the church, it's not really driven by a love of God or a desire for spiritual enlightenment. It's a protection racket.
It is 100% a protection racket. The text is so explicit about this. John's conversion is driven by pure terror. He converts to avoid the razor on the street, and he converts to avoid his father's belt at home. Piety is simply the price you pay for physical safety.
That reframes every single prayer of the book. John looks at the saints, these women dressed in white, shouting and crying out to God, and you realize he doesn't see joy or ecstasy. He sees refugees.
He sees survivors. They're survivors of a hostile world, and that fear is the currency of the realm. And it's a currency that is weaponized by the central figure in John's life, his stepfather, Gabriel.
Which brings us to our third and maybe the most complex insight. We have to talk about how this system operates on a personal level. We have to talk about moralizing trauma.
Gabriel. He's the monster of the book, but he's a very complicated monster.
He's the head deacon. He's a preacher. He's the absolute authority in the home. He's the one who beats John. But the genius of Baldwin's structure is that we don't only see him from the outside, through John's terrified eyes.
Right. In part 2 of the novel, the narrative shifts, and we get these long flashbacks. We get to go behind the curtain and see Gabriel's backstory.
And what a backstory it is.
This is where the systems analysis gets really fascinating, because Gabriel's public identity, his performance, is as this anointed man of God. He is rigid, he is judgmental, he hates sin with a fiery passion. But we learn that in his youth, down south, he was the biggest sinner of them all. He drank, he fought, he ran wild.
But it's more than that. It's not just that he has a past. It's that after he was supposedly saved, after he became a preacher and put on the holy robes, He had an affair,
with a woman named Esther.
and they had a child together, a son.
Royal.
A son named Royal.
Yeah.
And Gabriel, the holy man, the preacher, the judge of everyone else's sins, what did he do?
He abandoned them. It's worse than that. He didn't just leave. He effectively stole money from her. He refused to give her the money she needed for the child. He treated her as if she were the sole sinner in the equation, while he was just the holy man who had a momentary fall.
He let Esther die. He let his son, Royal, grow up without a father, and then Royal dies in a knife fight in Chicago. And Gabriel kept it all a secret, his entire life.
He sacrificed two human beings, his own flesh and blood, to protect his status within the system, to protect his image as a saint.
That's the moral crime at the heart of the story.
Yes, but here's the crucial systemic shift. This is the part that is so hard and so important to understand. In his own mind, Gabriel doesn't see himself as a villain.
How is that possible?
He reframes everything. He reframes his own trauma, his guilt, his failures, and he calls them tests from God. He truly believes he is anointed. Therefore, anything he does, no matter how cruel or hypocritical, must be part of God's mysterious plan for his life.
That is terrifying, because it means he can never, ever be wrong.
Never. The system grants him absolute moral immunity. If he is anointed, then any resistance from his family, any question from his wife Elizabeth, any defiance from his stepson John is not just a domestic dispute, it's an act of rebellion against God himself.
He sanctifies his own abuse.
He sanctifies his trauma. He takes the profound guilt he feels over Royal, the son he abandoned, and he twists it into a weapon to use against his current family.
And that twisting brings us to the next layer of the machine, our fourth insight, the family as a transmission layer. Because Gabriel's unresolved trauma doesn't just stay inside him.
No, he builds a pipeline to transmit that sanctified trauma directly into the next generation. It's a perfect system. Gabriel looks at John, who is illegitimate, the son of another man from before he married Elizabeth, and he sees a living symbol of sin.
He sees the bondwoman's son, that biblical language he uses.
Exactly. He looks at John and he doesn't see a child. He sees a constant walking reminder of the sexual sin that he, Gabriel, is actually guilty of.
It's pure psychological projection. He hates John because John is a mirror.
He hates in John what he cannot face in himself. But because he has the authority of father and preacher, his projection becomes John's reality. Gabriel believes John is wicked, so he treats John with relentless cruelty. He beats him. He calls him ugly. He literally tells the boy he has the face of Satan.
And John, being a child, he believes it. He absorbs it. That was the feedback loop.
That's the tragic genius of the system. The system creates the very wickedness it claims to be punishing. John comes to hate his father, which is a perfectly rational response to being abused. But in this religious system, hating your father is a grave sin. So John feels guilty for his own hatred, which convinces him that he is a sinner, which in his mind justifies his father's punishment.
It's a closed loop of psychological torture. There's no escape.
And at the same time, Gabriel favors his biological son, Roy. He calls Roy the royal line,
which is a direct and really creepy echo of his dead son, Royal.
He's trying to get a do-over. He's trying to raise the pure son this time. But his method is all wrong. He spoils Roy, but he's also terrified of the world getting its hands on him, so he's incredibly strict. And this combination of indulgence and rigidity is what actually drives Roy right out into the streets to rebel.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The system produces the exact result it fears.
It's a train wreck in slow motion, and the characters are all locked onto their tracks by this belief system. So let's talk about the specific tools the system uses to keep them there. Our fifth insight: shame and judgment as tools of control.
This feels like it's the micro level, how the big system gets inside your head, and there's this image that starts the book and comes back over and over. The yellow stain.
Yes, the very opening scene. John is lying in bed on his 14th birthday. He's staring at a stain on the ceiling, and as he looks at it, his mind transforms it into the image of a woman's nakedness.
And his immediate reaction is not curiosity. It's panic. It's shame. He feels like he has already committed a sin just by having the thought.
Baldwin is showing us right from page 1 how the system polices the body and the mind. John is 14. He's going through puberty. This is a natural biological process, but the system has taught him that his own body is the enemy. It forges this unbreakable link between natural human development and spiritual sin.
There's that other scene that is so deeply uncomfortable to read, when John has to scrub his father's back in the bathtub.
A profoundly disturbing scene. It feels transgressive just to read it.
It does. John sees his father's nakedness, and his mind immediately jumps to the biblical curse of Ham, the story of Noah's son who saw his father naked and was cursed for it.
And in that moment, the text links the physical body, and specifically the black male body, with this deep, ancient shame. It's the old Adam. It's something corrupt that must be beaten and scrubbed into submission.
So to control the person, the system has to first make them ashamed of their own skin.
Absolutely. If you can be convinced that your own body is a source of sin and evil, you become much, much easier to govern. You will constantly be looking for something outside of yourself to save you from yourself.
You'll look for a savior, a church, a father figure.
Precisely. If your body is the enemy, you need the church to help you defeat it. Which brings us to the climax of the book and our sixth and final insight from the text. Salvation as compliance versus liberation.
The threshing floor.
Yeah.
This is the big scene. John is in the church during the Terry service, and he's struck down by the Spirit. He's on the floor, convulsing, shouting, and it's described in these incredibly violent, terrifying terms.
This is not a gentle, peaceful moment of revelation. It is spiritual warfare. Baldwin describes it as a battle. John feels like he's in darkness, in a pit. He's hearing voices. It's an ordeal. And to get through it, to get out of the pit and be saved, the Spirit demands something very specific from him.
He has to surrender.
But surrender what, exactly? He has to surrender his hatred for his father, Gabriel.
Which, on the surface, sounds positive. You know, forgiveness is supposed to be a good thing, letting go of hate.
In a healthy system, maybe, but we have to look at what it means in the system. What was John's hatred? His hatred was his only defense mechanism. It was the only part of him that correctly recognized that his father's cruelty was unjust. It was his moral compass.
So by surrendering that hatred, by accepting the salvation that his abuser preaches, he's capitulating. He's giving up the fight.
He is giving up the one part of himself that was still resisting the psychological abuse. In that moment, he becomes a saint in order to avoid being crushed by the saints. He joins the system in order to survive the night.
So it's not liberation, it's compliance.
It's compliance disguised as liberation. He is saved, yes, but he's also sealed. He's sealed inside the very structure that has been tormenting him his entire life.
That's a devastating reading of that scene. It's usually read as this moment of triumph, but you're framing it as a kind of strategic defeat.
It's a survival strategy. And we have to be clear. Survival is not the same thing as freedom. John survives the night. He is embraced by the community. He is one of them now. But the price is that he can no longer trust his own judgment about his father. He must now accept Gabriel's authority as God-given and righteous. The system has won.
I want to try and visualize all of this for our listeners. We promised a systems map. We've talked about all these different gears. But let's try to look at the whole machine at once. If we were drawing this on a whiteboard, what does the territory look like?
Okay, let's break it down into 4 categories. First, you have your actors, the players in the game. At the top, the institution, that's the church itself. The temple of the fire baptized. It's the ultimate source of authority and the provider of safety.
Okay, the institution.
Below that, the patriarchs. Father James, the pastor, and Gabriel, the deacon. These are the enforcers. They interpret the institution's laws and wield its power. They hold the keys to the kingdom.
And then you have that layer you mentioned earlier, the transmission layer.
Right. And this is crucial. This layer is made up of the mothers and the aunts, Elizabeth, Florence, Deborah. These women are fascinating because they know the truth. Florence, Gabriel's sister, she knows he's a liar. She has a letter that could expose his secret past with Esther. Elizabeth knows he's cruel to John.
But they're silenced by the system. Or trapped.
They're trapped. They become the transmission layer because, to survive, they have to facilitate the system's hold on the children. They're the ones who dress the children for church, who bring them there, who enforce the rules at home, not because they're evil, but because they're in a brutally pragmatic fight for survival.
For financial stability, for respectability.
In 1935 Harlem, what other options does a single black mother have? The system traps them, and they, in turn, become the conduits that trap the children.
And at the bottom of the map, the subjects. The children, John, Roy, Elisha, they are the raw material that the entire system is designed to mold.
Now, category 2, the incentives. Why do the actors do what they do? For the patriarchs like Gabriel, the incentive is moral authority, social status, and most importantly, the concealment of his own past sins. As long as he can perform the role of holy man, no one can question him about Esther and Royal. The incentive is absolute power.
Okay, and for the women?
Survival. Financial stability. the appearance of respectability in a world that offers them very little. And for the children, the incentive is the most primal of all. Avoid the pain, avoid the beatings, avoid the razor, and cling to the promise, that seductive, powerful promise that if they just follow all the rules, the racist white world can't hurt them.
Which brings us to the third category, the narratives. This is the software running on the system's hardware.
Exactly. These are the stories the system tells itself to justify its own existence. Story 1, suffering purifies. This means any pain you experience is not a flaw in the system, it's a gift from God to make you stronger.
Story 2, obedience equals righteousness. Thinking for yourself is dangerous. Following orders is holy.
And the most important one, the narrative that locks the whole thing down. The world is wicked. This creates a siege mentality, an isolationism that says leaving the group is not just a disagreement, it's suicide. You can never leave because the world outside will destroy you.
And all of this creates the final category, the feedback loops. We've touched on this, but let's make it really explicit.
It's a vicious cycle. Let's trace it with Gabriel. Trauma, his guilt over Royal, leads to moral rigidity. He becomes a stricter preacher. That rigidity leads to repression. He can't acknowledge his own hypocrisy, which leads to transmission. He projects his sin onto John and abuses him.
And the loop closes because John's reaction to the abuse, his hatred, is then interpreted by the system as proof that John is sinful and needs more punishment.
It's a self-correcting, self-perpetuating machine. This is why the system persists, even when it's clearly producing suffering. When Roy gets cut in a street fight, the system doesn't conclude our parenting strategy failed. It concludes, see, we were right all along, the world is evil and we need to be even stricter.
It eats its own failures and converts them into fuel.
That is the hallmark of a closed, toxic system. It cannot be disproven from within because every piece of negative evidence is simply reinterpreted as proof that you need the system more than ever.
So let's bring this all forward. It's 2026. We're talking about a book written in 1953 about events in 1935. Why does this blueprint still matter? For someone listening who isn't religious or isn't Black or lives in a completely different world, why should they care about this machine?
Because the scars are systemic and these systems are still with us. The specific content might change, the religious doctrine, the social rules, but the form, the architecture of control remains eerily familiar.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's start with the growing conversation around religious trauma syndrome. The way Baldwin describes the threshing floor scene, the induced panic, the dissociation, the complete loss of self under extreme social pressure, it's a perfect clinical description of what people who leave high control groups report today. Baldwin gave us the diagnostic manual for this 70 years ago.
It's the mechanics of breaking a person down to build them back up in the group's image. And you don't just see that in religion. You can see it in political cults, in multi-level marketing schemes, even in some extreme corporate cultures.
Then there's the inheritance of shame. Think about the yellow stain and John's immediate panic about his own sexuality. We still see this silent transmission of shame. It's in the way a parent changes the channel when a love scene comes on. It's in the jokes that are told or the silence around certain topics. Parents pass their own unresolved fears and anxieties down to their children, often without ever speaking a single explicit word about it. It's atmospheric.
And the big one, which feels more relevant than ever, is respectability politics.
Absolutely. This is the enduring, powerful belief, especially within marginalized communities, that if you just perform goodness perfectly, if you pull up your pants, if you speak the right way, if you're holy and clean, then the structural violence of the larger society cannot touch you.
But the book viciously exposes that as a lie.
It shows it's a dangerous fallacy. You just have to look at the story of Richard, who is John's biological father. In the flashbacks, we learn his story. He wasn't a saint, but he was a good man, and he was arrested for a crime he didn't commit, beaten by the police, and driven to suicide. Being good and innocent didn't save him from a racist justice system.
So the church's promise, Gabriel's promise, that piety is a shield against racism, is a lie.
It's a lie the system tells its members to keep them compliant. It's a tool of control. It shifts the blame for systemic violence onto the individual's moral failings.
This connects so directly to the whole mission of this project, A Crisis in Perception. We're all about examining how systems literally shape the way we see reality.
And this novel is a masterclass in demonstrating that process. Take the idea of system versus individual blame. It is so easy to read this book and just hate Gabriel. He is, by any measure, a villain. But if you apply a systems lens, you see that Gabriel is also a product.
He wasn't born a monster.
He was born into a world, the Jim Crow South, that gave him zero power. He was nobody. He had nothing. The church was the one place in his world where a black man could be a king. It gave him a throne. So he protects that throne, even at the cost of his own family, because it is the only power he has ever known.
That doesn't excuse his actions, but it explains the mechanism. It's a much more complex picture.
Exactly. It moves us from Gabriel is a bad person to this system produces Gabriels, and it shows how this perception shaping works on the inside. The belief system literally alters John's perception of the physical world. He looks in a mirror and sees ugliness because the system has taught him that his features, the features of his biological father, are the face of a bastard, the face of sin.
He's been programmed to see himself as flawed.
Programmed is the right word, and that programming explains the difficulty of liberation. Why is it so unbelievably hard for John to just walk out the door and leave?
Because leaving isn't just an option.
Because the system has defined leaving as equivalent to death. To walk away would be to lose his community, his family, his entire history, and, he's been told, his eternal soul. Baldwin shows us that you can't simply choose to be free when the entire architecture of your consciousness has been built by your oppressor.
So we've taken the machine apart, we've looked at all the gears and feedback loops. What are we left with? After this deep dive, what do we see differently?
I think we're left with a fundamental shift in perspective on some very common words. Faith, for instance. In this book, it's not just a set of beliefs, it's a survival strategy, a technology for enduring the unendurable.
Inheritance. It's
Yeah.
not just about genes or money. We inherit our parents' unresolved fears. We inherit their gods and their demons.
And authority. The central authority in the novel, Gabriel's authority, is built entirely on a lie, his secret sin. And the system protects that lie in order to preserve the structure of authority itself.
Which leaves us with freedom. The book ends with this giant open question. John has been saved, but he's also been sealed. Is he safe now, or is he just more securely trapped?
Baldwin is too smart to answer that for us. He leaves us there, on the morning after the service. John is walking into a new day. The sun is coming up, the streets are still dirty, and the last thing we're told is that John smiles. But what that smile means is ambiguous.
There is that one line, though, that feels like a clue. Baldwin writes that John finds his redemption over his father's head.
Over his father's head. That's the final provocation of the novel. It's a puzzle.
I love that phrasing. What do you think it really means to get something over your father's head?
I think it suggests a possibility of transcendence, that John's spiritual experience on the threshing floor, whatever it was real to him, but it bypassed the official channels. He found God, or something powerful, despite his father, not because of him. He went over the middleman's head and straight to the source.
So the question the book leaves us with is it possible to keep the faith but discard the father?
Can you inhabit a system, a family, a religion, a country without being consumed by its toxic feedback loops? Can John take the strength from the experience, the community, the music, the history of endurance, and somehow reject the shame, the hatred, and the lies?
That's the question anyone who has ever inherited a flawed system has to answer for themselves, isn't it? Do I burn the whole thing down and walk away, or do I try to find a new way to live inside it?
It's the essential question of modern life, I think.
We have been diving deep into Go Tell It on the Mountain by the incredible James Baldwin. If you haven't read this book, or if it's been a long time, please find a copy. Our summary can't begin to capture the power of the language, the rhythm of the prose, and the deep interiority of the characters. It is an absolute masterpiece.
It really is. It's one of those books that changes your own internal architecture a little bit.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
And if you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next. Thank you for listening.
Goodbye.